herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe von CROPfm. Stephenville Lights and High Strangeness ist der Titel der heutigen Sendung und mein Telefongast ist Moulton Howe. Natürlich kann man sich auch heute wieder an diesem Gespräch live beteiligen, auch wenn es in Englisch gehalten ist leider. Via CROPcom, CROPfm.moulton.at, die Website von CROPfm, und dann auf den blinkenden CROPcom-Button klicken. Immer Zungenbrecher. Und ja, ich sehe diesen Chat hier ein und freue mich schon auf interessante Fragen. Und Dreamwalker ist gerade eingetreten und sagt: Hallo Bewohner dieser Ebene. Hallo Dreamwalker. Ein Newsletter gibt es zu dieser Sendung, der wird alle 2 Wochen verschickt und man kann sich auf der Website von CROPfm ebenfalls subscriben, CROPfm.moulton.at, kein www davor bitte. Und der wird alle 2 Wochen ausgeschickt und enthält einen Abriss der kommenden Sendung. Es gibt einen Podcast zu dieser Sendung, sowie alle vergangenen Sendungen im Archiv zu finden sind, also MP3 und Real Audio. Es gibt ein Forum, in dem sich immer mehr Leute jetzt tummeln und sehr spannende Kommentare abgegeben werden und auch Diskussionen geführt werden über alle möglichen Themen. Und mailen kann man mir natürlich auch CROPfm@moulton.at oder vom Mail-Link aus von der Startseite. Ärzte über Impfungen nennt sich eine neue Website von Dr. Johann Leubner. Impfungen wurden nicht von Ärzten, sondern von medizinischen Laien erfunden und von Napoleon Bonaparte nicht aus ärztlichen, sondern aus militärischen Motiven eingeführt. Das sagt er in der Einführung zu seiner Website. Die Impfindustrie propagiert seit damals den Glauben, die großen Seuchen der Vergangenheit seien durch Impfungen ausgerottet worden. Dass jene Seuchen bei uns verschwunden sind, verdanken wir in Wahrheit dem zunehmenden Wohlstand und anderen hygienischen Bedingungen. Die meisten Seuchen waren beinahe schon verschwunden, bevor man zu impfen begonnen hatte. Und ähnliche Dinge erzählt er auch in der Sendung, die ich einmal mit ihm gemacht habe, über dieses Thema Impfungen. Natürlich viel ausführlicher und auf jeden Fall sehr hörenswert. Aber auch seine Website ist sehr sehenswert und so wie alle Newsartikel, die ich hier behandle, sind sie auf der Startseite von CROPfm in der News-Sektion verlinkt. Moulton Howe hat exzessiv über die Stephenville Lights berichtet und sie wird uns ja heute auch mehr darüber erzählen. Und es gibt einige äußerst spannende Artikel, so wie immer auf ihrer Website. Fewer Comments on Aerial Lights and Symbols in Texas zum Beispiel. Der jüngste Artikel zum Thema Stephenville und Stephenville Lights. Und auch sehr interessant, Abductee Jim Sparks Comments on Alien Symbol Technology. Auch über diese Symbole, die da am Himmel aufgeblinkt sind, werden wir heute sprechen. Und über vieles mehr, aber die Website von Moulton Howe, Erstfiles.com, ist jedenfalls immer wieder einen Besuch wert. Dort werden eigentlich jeden Tag interessante Dinge gepostet. Vor ein paar Wochen hatte ich das in den News, diese Kornkammer, die da in Norwegen oder bei Spitzbergen gebaut wird oder wurde. Doomsday Seed Vault opens in Norway, beziehungsweise der Artikel auf Deutsch, frostige Arche Noah für Saatgut auf Spitzbergen. In 3 Berghöhlen sollen hier bei Dauerfrost die Keime von mehr als 4 Millionen Pflanzen wie Reis, Mais, Bohnen und Kartoffeln gesammelt, eingefroren und für die Zukunft gesichert werden. Mit dieser eisernen Reserve sollen die Menschen nach möglichen Katastrophen durch Klimaveränderungen, Kriege, Epidemien oder anderen Problemen wieder neue Keime aller existierenden Nutzpflanzen anbauen können. Und wie gesagt, ich hatte das vor ein paar Wochen oder Monaten in den News. Das war damals ein auf Project Camelot erschienener Brief eines besorgten norwegischen Politikers. Und die nehmen das ganze Thema ziemlich ernst und ich frage mich, was die wissen, was wir nicht wissen vielleicht. Oder planen, wie manche spekulieren, aber ja. Electronic Tattoo Display runs on blood. Das muss man einfach gesehen haben, das Ding. Ja, ein Touchscreen, der unter die Haut geht, kann ich nur sagen. Artikel ist verlinkt. Ganz seltsam, Arizona Firefighters trained for UFO Alien Contact. Also muss ich vorstellen, diese Feuerwehr-Manuals da, die verwendet werden, enthalten interessante Dinge, nämlich 600-page Guide may lend credibility to UFO believers. The Fire Officer's Guide to Disaster Control can apparently be found in firehouses across the United States. It covers everything from fire and flood response to aviation disasters. Chapter 13 of the book has an unusual twist. Titled Enemy Attack and UFO Potential, it outlines what could happen in the event of a UFO crash. Cryon bei den United Nations, auch sehr interessant, in 1995, 96, 98, 2005, 2006 and 2007, Cryon was invited to come to New York and channel for the Society of Enlightenment and Transformation, SEED, a member of the United Nations Staff Recreation Council. Wirklich eine sehr interessante Organisation, die United Nations und Recreation Council, also ich nehme an, das sind sehr interessante Freizeitbeschäftigungen, denen die Leute dort nachgehen. Emmerich hat uns ja schon mit Independence Day beglückt und jetzt bereitet er die Apokalypse für 2012, stürzt sich also auch auf dieses Thema. Verschwörungstheoretiker predigen schon lange, dass im Jahr 2012 die Welt untergehen und oder in eine neue Dimension eintreten wird. Da will Roland Emmerich natürlich nicht einfach nur zusehen, sondern einen Film darüber drehen. Nachdem er die Erde bereits zerstört und eingefroren hat, ist er jetzt bei diversen Hollywood-Studios mit einem Drehbuchentwurf mit dem simplen Titel 2012 vorstellig. Um was es darin geht, ist noch völlig unklar. Nur ein einziges Wort zur Story ist bislang durchgesickert. Apokalyptisch. Ja, es gibt natürlich auch Sendung zu diesem Thema auf CROPfm, damals mit Nicola Wohlgemuth, die sicher auch sehr spannend war. Ja, nicht nur in Stephenville, sondern überall scheinen die UFO-Sichtungen on the rise zu sein, also immer mehr anzusteigen. So ein Artikel aus England. 3 pilots were among more than 100, mainly anonymous people, who reported the sightings, which included a flying saucer in Staffordshire, a fast-moving triangular object in Wakefield, West Yorkshire. 2 of the pilots were flying over Alderney in the Channel Islands when they saw a bright orange object, they said, while the others saw a balloon-like object over the southwest. The number of sightings rose from 2006 when 97 unidentified aircraft were reported. A number of callers insist they saw a definite UFO. Ich weiß zwar nicht genau, wie man das feststellen mag, aber wenn es ganz sicher kein Flugzeug ist oder irgendeine andere Himmelserscheinung, die man kennt oder von dem man jemals gehört hat oder irgendjemand, mit dem man spricht, dann ist es wahrscheinlich ein definite UFO. Und also es passiert nicht nur in Stephenville und auch hier, ich habe jetzt unlängst mit Walter Kaliber und Jürgen Trieb gesprochen, ein Journalistenpaar aus der Steiermark, und die haben unglaublichste Aufnahmen, tausende von Aufnahmen. Und ich werde auch demnächst einmal mit Ihnen ein Interview machen. Also weltweit ist dieses Phänomen anscheinend im Anstieg begriffen, oder vielleicht sind wir alle nur hysterisch, keine Ahnung. Jedenfalls, die Frage ist schon irgendwie, was passiert da? Und Linda Moulton beschäftigt sich seit 30 Jahren damit. Sie weiß vielleicht ein paar mögliche Theorien mehr, von denen wir noch nicht gehört haben, oder hat vielleicht ein paar Clues entdeckt in ihren langen Recherchen. Ja, und hier geht es also jetzt dann auch gleich weiter mit Linda Moulton Howe. Ich werde jetzt dann gleich anrufen. Und in der Zwischenzeit spiele ich Luxus mit Inner City.
Get a little bit higher. Get a little bit pale, and I fall a little bit asleep then. I wake up and I'll be high again. No one cares about it. Fall a little bit deeper, and I become a little creep, and I may appear a little brighter, but I am so pale, and the city's coming back to town.
Stanford University with a master's degree in communication, Linda Moulton Howe has received local, national and international awards, including 3 regional Emmys and a national Emmy nomination. She has devoted her documentary film, television and radio career to productions concerning science, medicine and the environment, and of course high strangeness. And here she is from Albuquerque, New Mexico, Linda Moulton Howe. Hello, Linda.
Well, it's nice to be with you. And what is the weather like in Austria right now?
It got a lot warmer in the recent week, and I was very happy about this. But in the weekend, it's going to get grim again, as it seems.
Oh, dear. Well, it will be interesting to see if global warming has the impact this year in Europe that it has had of drought and fires and hot temperatures. Is it going to get worse or is it going to get cooler? It's really an interesting question. And it's part of the Earth mysteries around us that seem to be proliferating in every direction. And I imagine that you and your listeners are aware of the multiple aerial light phenomena that has been reported in the Stephenville, Texas region since New Year's Day. And for those who might need some orientation, if you fly into Fort Worth, Dallas, that big, huge airport, and you got in a car, you'd have to drive southwest for about 3 hours to get to Stephenville. And in that region, I have a map at my news website, earthfiles.com, that shows what a perfect triangle Stephenville makes with Dublin and Selden. Those are 3 towns that have had multiple eyewitness sightings of things that are highly dramatic, which we can talk about in more detail. And then, just for more orientation, to the direct east of Stephenville is Glenrose, Texas. And when you get to Glenrose, you are right on the edge of the huge blackout circle that surrounds the George Bush presidential compound in Crawford. It is a no-fly zone when the president is there, and that no-fly zone comes right up to the edge of Glenrose. So everything I'm going to be talking about during this radio program is taking place, you might say, on the doorstep of George Bush's Texas ranch. And there's one other geographic area that has turned out to be quite fascinating. It is about 35 miles southwest of Dublin, and that is Brownwood. And as we talk this morning, I will go into each of these areas about some of the extraordinary things that have happened now since January 1st. And if you want, we can do this a little bit chronologically, and I can start with January 1st and what happened at the home of Ricky Sorrells in Dublin.
Yeah, that would be great.
Right.
Let's just go through the whole... the Stephenville lights were a very complex and a very unusual sighting, and it went well over a month. And as you just said, it also took place in the area, in the vicinity of the Bush Ranch. Right. And of course, this spurred a lot of speculation, especially about F-16s scrambling and so on.
The jet scramble story is a complete phony lie.
Okay.
It's a complete phony lie. The people who lived there said no, there was no scrambling. It wasn't 16, it was 10. 10 F-16 jets. That was the phony story that the Navy released a whole week and a half after the events that were reported on television. And it was so funny that people living there said if there had been 10 F-16 jets going over any of the area between Glenrose and Stephenville, everybody would have known. And not a single person heard anything that would even come remotely close to 10 F-16 jets screaming in the sky. And on top of that, every single sighting of now at least 40 eyewitnesses, the one word they use is absolute silence by objects above them that are so big that they have repeatedly been estimated at 1,000 feet long. So an object that is seen by multiple people 1,000 feet long, making no sound, can in no way be explained by 10 screaming F-16s. Not possible.
Okay, that's not what I meant, actually. So I understand you correctly, I thought that people, they've seen the phenomena and they've seen the craft with the unusual sightings, and that's what I thought. They also have seen F-16 chasing them, or flying around in this area. So that didn't happen. There were no F-16 sightings.
Okay, so for clarity, the F-16 and helicopter appearances came after the aerial phenomena events.
All right, yeah. Then.
And when we start with the Ricky Sorrells event in Dublin, it's New Year's Day, and he has been watching the sun going down. It's a nice, clear day, cold but clear, and he decides that he wants to go deer hunting on his property. And having been there and walked with him, I now understand. He and his family have a tiny house that is surrounded by property that when you go a specific direction, it is like a maple tree forest, if you can imagine, maple trees growing like a forest. And I went with him down the path, and it is about a quarter of a mile to get to the place where he was crouched down with his gun, and the gun was set on a power for looking at deer, not for raising the gun up to see something in the sky. And something caught his attention, or he doesn't understand because he didn't hear anything, but he knows that something made him whip his head to look up. And when he did, he couldn't see any sky. The sky was obliterated by what looks to his machinist mind and eye. That's what he's done professionally his whole life, is make metal things. He's looking at what is unpolished. It is not shiny. It is a dull gray that he compared to what is called barn tin gray here in the U.S. And as far as he could see, to the right and to the left in the trees, and as far as he could see in front of him, was this gray metal. And every 40 feet or so, he estimated, was an embedded cone-shaped hole, very regular, on very straight lineups with each other. And the embedding of the holes, he estimated, went approximately 4 to 6 feet into the body of whatever this huge thing was. And the next thing that he knows, trying to understand and realizing that in his machinist mind and eye, he can't see a rivet, he can't see a bolt, he can't see any lines. It is like one solid, huge mold. And having been there with him, I understand why he said it was at least 3 football fields long, because when you stand where he was crouched and you look up and you see as far as you can see left to right and you walk it off, it is about 1,000 feet. So the object was taking and obliterating the sky. He estimated was at least 1,000 feet long, made out of whatever this mold appearance was of metal with these embedded cone-shaped holes every 40 feet in very straight lines. And then, to his complete astonishment, he's staring right at the holes, and he knows that it moves, but he doesn't feel anything. There's no air movement. There's no sound. There's no light adjustment. It's just was right there, 300 feet above him. And the next thing, it is going at the horizon. He said it would just be like if you blinked your eyes, that something 1,000 feet long would suddenly be near the horizon with a blink of an eye. Now, that same description has emerged from other people on different dates who have seen these huge objects and have said it was right there, and then the next second it was at the horizon. That is, if it's motion in a physical universe, it's not motion we understand, because it means there's no inertia and air molecules are not being moved. And that's why some people have reached as far as holographic image projections to try to explain what has been happening in Texas, because they cannot understand what the physics would be of an object that can move from in front of you to the horizon in a second without some kind of commotion. So that is the New Year's Day experience of Ricky Sorrells. In
quite
the
some
following days, by approximately 4 to 5 days later, he began realizing that large double-propellered helicopters and jets were flying over and circling over his Maplewood forest. And that's the report that connects military presence to his sighting in Dublin. But now let's go to January 8th, 1 week later. This is the now famous, infamous, multiple eyewitness sighting of so many different objects in the Stephenville area. And for listeners, to go from Dublin to Stephenville is only about 8 to 10 miles. So we're talking about towns in a triangular pattern that are very, very close to each other. But on January 8th, it was the residents of Stephenville, a town of about 50 15,000 people, that at least 36 eyewitnesses that night in different parts of Stephenville started calling up the police, the constable, and the newspaper and saying, I am looking at something that is huge, and it has lights pulsing all over it in red, green, yellow, and blue. I have never seen anything like it. I don't know what it is. Starting all of these reports is one of the more dramatic that I've ever heard in my professional life. And this was at 6:10 p.m. on January 8th, 2008. A businessman named Steve Allen, who is the owner of a transportation company in Glenrose and has been a pilot for more than 20 years, he had gone with two friends up on a hill in Selden, which is very close to Stephenville and very close to Glenrose, in between Stephenville and Glenrose. And they had just decided that these three guys wanted to catch up, and they had just climbed up a hill where they had a little campfire, and they were going to watch the sun go down and just talk. And that's what they were doing when, at 6:10, the sun was just still a little bit above the horizon. So it was that color of a sky when it's going into twilight, but the sun is just about to dip below the hill. And the first thing, and they all were, my God, what is that? Are four huge, and huge meaning, when you look at lights in the sky, let's take the moon. Let's take a full moon. Everybody thinks of a full moon as huge. Well, you can extend your arm, anybody can do this, and the tip of your little finger, the tip of the little fingernail will cover a full moon with your arm extended. So when I ask the pilot, if you extend your arm, what would it take to cover up the size of these four brilliant white lights that have now appeared in the sky in front of you in the shape of a rectangle, meaning four lights are at four corners forming a huge rectangle in the sky? And he said, Linda, each of those lights, with my arm extended, I would need a quarter, which is a coin in the United States that is an inch in diameter. And an inch in diameter means that these were pretty large. Now, the four bright white lights do not move. They keep and hold a very rigid rectangular pattern. And as they pass in front of the three men, they now can see what is like the rear, if you want to say that four lights are moving forward and therefore the back two lights would be the rear. They suddenly see five more bright white lights, evenly spaced, just pop on all together between the back two white lights. Now there are seven. And then, like he said, this all kept happening on a beat of like every 2 seconds. The back of the configuration kept changing. So it goes, five lights pop in, now there are seven. Seven lights pop suddenly into a vertical line of seven white lights. That means that the two forming the rectangle are still there, further beyond, but now there's no rear. The rear has turned into seven vertical lights. Then, 2 seconds later, the seven vertical lights seem to split into twins. So now there are two vertical lines of bright white lights, each equally separated in the sky. And then, to their complete and total consternation, and one of the men actually became afraid and left. He was so afraid of what happened. The two vertical lines change into what looked like, this is the pilot's description, think of three-dimensional frames, rectangular frames in the sky about 100 feet by 150 feet, and they are filled with white fire, moving flames. All three men could see the moving flames in these huge rectangles, and the one guy was so afraid after they said, this looks like something out of the Bible, what is going to happen next? One of the men ran to his car and drove away.
Who can blame him?
Yeah, and then the pilot and the other guy said, as quickly as all of this drama had occurred, the lights just seemed to fade out or pop away, and they thought it was all over. But in just a couple of more minutes, coming now back from the direction that this enormous display of lights had been moving past them, coming now back as if reversing, are now the two front, very bright, he said you'd have to have a magnesium torch to get the bright whiteness of these lights. Now there are the two front ones in the front, and they can see the two white lights in the back forming that rectangle again of an object that the pilot said had to be a mile long and a half mile wide if it was an object that these four lights were attached to, but not a single one of the three men could ever say that they discerned the body amid the lights. So remember that. It's very confusing to the humans who watch this, because the lights definitely changed patterns, and they had the psychological impression that it was a gigantic object producing all of this, but they couldn't see what was in between the lights. So now this thing is coming back, and in the back, where the two, we'll call it the two rear, big white lights are, each of those lights is surrounded by a half circle of glowing red light that Steve Allen said, Linda, I tell you, I have never seen that color in my life. All I can do is tell you it was a shade of red I have never seen. And at earthfiles.com, at my news website, I have everything that I'm talking to you about with the drawings that the pilot Steve Allen did for me, and they are all at Earthfiles. All you have to do is go to www.earthfiles.com, and in the quick search button in the upper left, just type in Stephenville, Stephenville, and it will come up with the 7 or 8 reports that I have done now, and you just can click through each of them, and you will see all of the photographs and the drawings and the computer illustrations that go with everything I'm talking to you about, from Ricky Sorrells to Steve Allen to many other events that we'll talk about. So now imagine that the two men, the one is left, the two men are sitting still on their hill, their mouths are open, and these lights are back, but with these red half glowing circles on the rear ones. And in the distance, Steve Allen, the pilot, said, came two screaming, that was his verb, two screaming F-16s with their afterburners blazing. So, Derek, this is the one time when there was instantaneous jet presence while the phenomena is still in front of eyewitnesses, what I'm describing right now.
Yeah, and of course your website is linked up from my show description. Also, a lot of those articles you mentioned are in the news section for anyone who listens to it from the archive.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
It's important for people to see what these eyewitnesses have tried to draw. So the two F-16s come screaming, and Steve Allen, the pilot, said that, and you're going to continue to hear this description. He said, those lights were right in front of us. They were, if they were moving, it was hardly visible at that moment. Stationary, this gigantic thing, the jets are screaming, and he said the very next second, the light, the pattern, the craft, whatever it is,
this huge thing is at the horizon. It is in front of them, and the next second it is at the horizon. And the jets curve and are screaming, going after the direction. And he said there was no way those jets would ever be able to catch up with whatever those lights were. That was 6:10 p.m., January 8th, 2008, and throughout that evening for the next 2 to 4 hours, people all over the Stephenville area were reporting lights jumping around in random patterns on something that seemed to be large. Now, I've talked about this with Steve Allen, the pilot, and with Ricky Sorrells, the machinist, and has said, is it possible, do you think, that what Ricky Sorrells saw in daylight with all those embedded holes on something 1,000 feet long could be what generates all of these lights in these strange patterns? And, of course, it's speculation, and people say, well, maybe. Nobody knows. Now, what no one in Stephenville or Dublin or Selden or Glenrose knew at that week was that on January 4th, so that's between New Year's Day and January 8th, over at a family's very rural home in Brownwood, which again is about 35 miles southwest of Dublin, would take about an hour to drive there from Stephenville. The family has, about a half a mile from their home, a deer feeder complex. That's about the only way I can put it. There are multiple positions of feed. Some of the feed is in blocks. For those of you who, I don't know in Europe if they do this, but lots of people do this in the United States. The blocks of feed will be about 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches compressed, and it is set out for animals to get used to coming for food, and then every once in a while people will go and hunt in these areas where the deer feeders are. So at this location, there is a metal deer feeder that drops food, and on either side of the metal feeder, about 20 feet in front and 20 feet in back, are these, we'll call them deer feed blocks. So there are about 3 places where deer and animals can come for food. And 38 feet away from the deer feeders are 2 infrared cameras manufactured by Swan, SWANN. At Earth Files, in my updated February 22nd, 2008 report, I show not only the drawings by the pilot Steve Allen about what happened in Selden, but I show what happened 4 days before in Brownwood of photographs of this deer feeder layout, as I'm describing, and I give the specs that the Swan cameras, I give the lens and the parameters, and I show the cameras, and they're about 5 feet above ground and mounted on wooden posts, not metal posts, and at the base they are weighted with rocks. And I show that right behind the metal feeder, which drops food to the ground, going back approximately 12 to 15 feet, the land rises slightly, about 5 feet, and there's another block of feed up there, and you can see all this at Earth Files. Well, on January 4th, what appears to be a very bright white plasma orb appears at the camera lenses. I sat on the floor of this home. They had 6 hours of infrared videotape that ran through the entire night of January 4th, and this object shows up for the first moment at 6:28 p.m. on January 4th. And when it shows up, it is as if this very bright, circular, white orb, which I would estimate, based on the camera lenses, is about 6 inches, no more than 12 inches in diameter. It seems to literally be examining the cameras, and it has this very odd pulsing movement around the lenses. I've never seen anything like it. Imagine looking at something that is white, glowing, clearly self-radiating heat, and that it's circular, and that you can see the deer feeders beyond that the cameras are focused on, but this thing fills up a good portion of the frame at times, and it would suddenly, I don't know how many times in a second, but maybe 10 or 15 motions in a second, this object would move very rapidly, right, left, right, left, right, left, very odd on an angle, but never moving out of the lens, meaning that all this action is taking place right within the lens, almost as if this object knows the parameters of the frame of the cameras. And then this object it will move out of frame up or move out of frame down and then come back into frame, and instead of moving very rapidly right to left, it does a kind of falling leaf, a slow back and forth motion. And it does all of these complex things for 6 hours, all caught on these deer feeder infrared cameras.
Is the film?
Well, now
is the film available? Linda, the film, is it?
The videotape.
Yes.
I'm now working with a plasma physicist to study some of it, and then we are going to. No, the videotape has not been released. The family does not want it released yet.
Okay.
So I'm working with a scientist. If I can release it for television or any other way, I will. The family so far has not wanted to release this. So I'm describing to you what I saw in their house, sitting on the floor, watching the infrared videotape, and having gone out to the feeders. And the photos that I have at Earth Files are at the actual physical site where all this takes place. But I now want to take you back 1 month before January 4th to December 7th, and 2 weeks before December 7th to November 21st. I'm winding back the time clock from the deer feeders for a very important reason. At 1:41 a.m. on their infrared camera digital tape time code, November 21st, 2007, at 1:41 a.m., the frame of the cameras has never moved from tape to tape. The cameras are mounted where they are. The action just takes place on the ground with the animals most of the time, except for these plasmas. And you see like raccoons, a fox, come through, eating at the feed, and their little eyes glow when they look toward the camera direction. On November 21st, in this scene where little animals had been, and now there are no little animals running, in the upper left quadrant of the screen, if you divided the videotape screen into 4 sections, we're now in the upper left quadrant. What looks like a beam of light fades in. You don't see it come down. You don't see it pop in. The frame is there, and you realize at first it is so subtle, and you my God, there's a beam, and it's forming there, and you can see through it for a while. And for 5 minutes on the time code, this beam of light gets brighter and brighter and brighter until you can't see through it anymore. And what is there? Where exactly does this beam seem to be? Well, if you go to the profile that I have at earthfiles.com and you see the metal feeder and you see that rise of ground, the owners think that the beam of light formed right next to one of those blocks of deer feed on where the land is a little higher, and that may be why it seems to be in the upper left quadrant, because if it's not interacting with the ground, it would appear higher in the frame than the foreground, which is lower, and the animals are moving back and forth underneath the metal feeder. So that was for 5 minutes, November 21st, 1:41 a.m., and after the 5 minutes, the beam does not pop out, it doesn't lift out, it just fades back out the way it came in, almost like light on a rheostat. So now, from November 21st, we go forward to December 7th, 2007, at 5:05 p.m. At that time, in Texas, it is dark on December 7th. In the infrared, you see 3 deers are eating from the upper ground block of food, very near where that beam had come in 2 weeks earlier. And on the lower ground, where the metal feeder is and deer food, you see the deer move around from the top down to the metal feeder. You see rabbits go through, little animals go through. It's just a nighttime infrared scene of animals of varying sizes and types moving around these feeders. Something scares them. Nobody knows. You don't see. But all of a sudden, this very peaceful scene, the deer run off rapidly, and there's nothing. There's no animals anywhere. And then eventually, the 3 deer return. And one of the 3 deer is up on the raise where that block of feed is. The other 2 are down lower where the metal feeder is. And you see the upper deer moving slowly around that block of food, and the right leg of the deer moves to make a step. And if you overlaid where the beam of light was on November 21st with the frame in which the deer's leg moves forward, that deer's leg would be touching where the beam of light was 2 weeks earlier. But you do not see a beam of light on the December 7th tape. There's nothing except at that moment that right leg moves forward, that deer disappears. And I watched this videotape in every mode, frame by frame, stop frame, slow motion, normal speed, and it is as if in 1/30th of a second, the deer is there and the deer is gone. Now, why this would occur, the owners are asking me. Well, there's no beam that you can see on December 7th, but there was a definite beam for 5 minutes 2 weeks earlier, and where the deer disappears seems to be the same ground area where the beam was. Is there some residual effect from that beam? And that sets the scene for what I think is one of the actually more mysterious series of events that have been happening in the Stephenville region, but this is on the ground. Until February, they have now gathered about 4 more videotapes since January 4th, a very unusual, we'll call them white plasmas, for lack of a better term, coming intermittently to the feeder. And 2 weeks ago, in the middle of February, the father and the daughter decided out of curiosity that they would take one of the 2 infrared cameras and cock it up 60 degrees, not quite vertical, but on a 60-degree angle at the sky to see if I think in their mind, as the daughter said, we wondered where these white things are coming from, and could we see them coming from the sky down to where the deer feeder is. Well, 2 weeks ago, after they had done this, within 2 or 3 nights of having the camera on an angle, It doesn't last long. It's there for only a minute. But they said it is huge. It isn't the bright, bright white of what was seeming to hang around the ground cameras for so long, but it is round. It moves relatively slowly in the sky, comes in from the right of frame and leaves on the left of frame. It is up in the sky, and it lasts for a minute, and they have never seen anything like it. And all of this is going to kind of a bottom line that we've asked in crop circle research in Europe now for almost 2 decades. Are the circle makers in the crop formations operating in frequencies that most of the time the human eye cannot see? The human eye cannot see in infrared frequencies. So in Texas, what is raising the subject again, what is it? Is it solid? Is it energy? What is it that is operating in infrared frequencies that only the infrared cameras can pick up, and that it's happening in Brownwood? And could there be a lot happening in the skies over the Crawford Ranch, Stephenville, Glenrose, Selden, Dublin, even day or night, but is in infrared frequencies, and for most of the time you can't see it? But is it possible that some of the helicopter and jet activity, after people have seen the objects, are the military arriving because they are now focused on picking up frequencies emanating from objects that humans cannot see with their eyes? My professional guess is that much of the phenomena is always operating in frequencies beyond human vision. And I think Texas is a good example. Now, all of this infrared camera and plasma activity continued to occur in Brownwood while one of the most important videotapes, perhaps, of all time was taken by a man named David Carone standing on his front porch near the Stephenville, Texas Municipal Airport beginning at 10:10 p.m. on January 19th, 2008. What caught his attention, why he got his JVC digital camera, was what looked like a disc in the sky, not moving. And by then, January 19th, there had been, from January 8th to the 19th, there had been 11 days of constant headlines in the local papers, in news, national news, about all of these things in the sky in Texas, and that's why people were looking at the sky. So he gets his camera. He does not have a tripod. But the porch has wooden posts. In Texas, they call it a French porch. So there are these wooden posts around the front porch, and he puts his, as I understand it, his right shoulder and right arm against one of those wooden posts, and you can hear him on the videotape say, "I'm trying to brace myself so I'm not moving." And the disc, there's no other way to say this. You don't see the disc move. It seems to turn into, and when I use the word symbol, I don't know what else, because a symbol in my mind is something that looks like what would be used in written language, but I don't mean the alphabet of the United States. But it had each of these symbols that keeps pulsing where this disc was appear to me to look like symbols that I have found now in ancient languages. And so now in your mind's eye, imagine it's a black frame. You don't see stars on videotape camera. People say, well, where are the stars? I'm sorry, you don't pick up stars on a normal videotape camera. It just doesn't happen. So this disc that was there is replaced by pulsing symbols, and I hope everybody will allow me to use that word. I don't know what the patterns are, but I'm saying that they look like symbols. And I've gone through the tape, frame by frame, every 15 frames, like clockwork, which is 1/2 of a second in the 30 frames of NTSC, which is the U.S. video format. Every half second, the symbol changes to a new pattern. And we're talking about 2 symbols a second. There's 60 seconds in a minute, and there are at least 6 to 7 minutes of these pulsing symbols on this 12-minute videotape. The other parts of the videotape that do not contain the pulsing symbols, so you're talking over 1,000 different symbols, Derek. You can do the math yourself.
Yeah.
The man, David Carone, is so puzzled and so confused, and he's talking to somebody in the room, and he's saying, I don't know what this is. I'm going to aim the camera over at one of the lights at the airport and see if the light at the airport does the same thing, because maybe my camera has gone crazy. So he stops off of the pulsing symbols, focuses his JVC digital camera on one of the airport lights. You do not see anything but the light, but you do see, and this is interesting to me, you do see a 15-frame pulse when the camera is on the airport light. I don't understand what that's about. You don't see the light changing into a symbol. You don't see any symbols. You see an airport light, and it has a 15-frame pulse to it. I hope this is clear. Then he goes from what is clearly an airport light with that 15-frame pulse in it, refocuses back on the object, which is now continues to be the pulsing symbols in the sky, and that's why the symbol sequence is not unbroken for 12 minutes. The video runs for 12 minutes, but there are these places where he is breaking away because he can't understand. That's what he can't understand. He doesn't know what's happening in the sky. And he even says at one point on the videotape to whoever is in the house, this looks like hieroglyphs. That's where the term hieroglyphs got picked up in the media. I have never said, and no one else has said, they're hieroglyphs. The closest you can say is symbol, because that's more generic. But it was these people that night that were looking at this. That's what came to their minds. This is what came to David Carone's mind as he's looking at these pulsing symbols in his camera, that they looked like hieroglyphs.
And Linda, this film partly, I think, is online on the Stephenville Lights website. Is that correct?
What happened is that the news, American news, such as Fox Network, Corpus Christi TV, Dallas, they got the videotape from, I believe, Steve Allen or David Carone not long after the January 19th videotaping, because everybody began talking about this. I went to Texas on January 29th, which would be 10 days after the videotaping, largely because I had gotten a call about the disappearing deer and the beam of light in the plasma, and I wanted to see that videotape with my own eyes, and I did not understand the remarkable nature of the videotape with the pulsing symbols. I had been told that somebody had captured colored lights changing shape. When I sat in Steve Allen's office in Glen Rose, Texas, on the afternoon of January 31st, and I looked at the entire 12-minute videotape, I was in a mild state of shock because what I was seeing seemed very important. I recognized some of the symbols as being something I have seen and I'm finding now in ancient literature. I didn't know if they were from the human abduction syndrome or what, but I knew that I was seeing every second 2 different images, precise, intricate, the most intricate, like beads. Like if you made something in the sky out of colored beads that were intricately, the color coding was intricate to the beads. And then when you stop a frame and you study these symbols, they are constructed 3-dimensionally. You see this very intricate color beading overlaid by another layer of colored beading, overlaid by another layer of colored beading. I've never seen anything like it. I do not know how you would project it in a night sky and have all of this color hold so precisely on a JVC digital camera. I find it absolutely amazing, but that's what this videotape is about. Now, why are we not seeing this tape from beginning to end at Earth Files or anywhere? Well, this is the sad state of affairs of the world we are living in. By the time I got there on January 29th to the 31st, representatives of various TV programs affiliated with the Sci-Fi Channel, the History Channel, the Discovery Channel, Japanese Nippon TV were there in a feeding frenzy trying to buy up all of this videotape and the photos. When I looked at the tape in Steve Allen's office, I was not aware of any of that, right? Steve Allen told me that he had paid cash to David Carone a few $100s, and that David Carone had given Steve Allen, the pilot and businessman, a CD of the video and said, do with this whatever you want. And those were the words that Steve Allen said to me when he handed me a dub of the original that David Carone had given and had my name on it. Linda, I made this for you. I hope you can use this at Earth Files and in your work. This is Steve Allen, the pilot, talking to Linda Howe in his office on January 31st in Glen Rose. And when I saw the videotape, all I could think of was getting back to put sections at Earth Files, to isolate out all of these frames, to put them in as close to the sequence in which they appear. And I was prepared to do, if it took 20 Earth Files in parts, I was going to show everybody every single frame that was in focus of those symbols in sequence. That was my goal. I get home, and I find, because I'm on this trip, and I don't get back until the night, it was late night of February 1. And I find a fax, I believe was the first thing. I find a fax from an attorney in Beverly Hills representing a company called Motion Pictures Production, Inc., signed by a man named John Allen Lawns, whose name is also, it turns out, on an exclusive Hollywood release form signed by John Allen Lawns and David Carone. And what is the date? January 31st, 2008. The same day that I am there, this company out of Los Angeles has now, on that day, without my knowing anything, has gone to David Carone, had him sign and date an exclusive. That's a big deal here. If you have an exclusive agreement with some production company, and they pay you money for that exclusive agreement, no one else in the universe can use those photos, the videotape, or the drawings. Are you following me?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, I believe the first thing on my fax was simply a letter saying that these exclusive rights had been purchased, but I don't have proof. So I went ahead and did my first Earth files with the symbols. I used, I think, 21 of them and had a 3-second of videotape because nobody has proved to me that, in fact, there's an exclusive agreement. And why am I doubting it? Steve Allen had told me he had paid David Carone, and that Steve Allen, when I called him and said, I now have a letter telling me that this has occurred, Steve Allen has said, well, I'm going to an attorney because as far as I'm concerned, I am the owner. Okay, that was all beginning to take place February 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And all of this rumbling was going on, and I got my Earth Files report up and left it there until I believe it's there. This whole story is defined and laid out at Earth Files about exactly what happened. And so for a week or 7 days, the symbols and a 3-second video was at Earth Files, and you could see all of this in its real color. Then the attorney sends me a copy by fax of the exclusive agreement signed by this John Allen Wantz with David Carone's signature, and they crossed out the money that was paid. But as far as Linda Howe, a professional TV producer and reporter, is concerned, this was a company sending me their proof that they had an exclusive agreement with David Carone. My answer to this was to explain everything that happened, to describe each of the symbols that had been at Earth Files, and then to go and make pencil, and I told them I would do this, to do pencil sketches of the symbols that had been there and replace it that way, and unfortunately having to remove the videotape excerpt which showed the pulsing. Well, now, after I had done that, replying professionally, I learned that the StephenvilleLights.com still has the Fox networks. I think they have about 40 seconds or 30 seconds of the videotape pulsing, while Fox Network does a news show. There are a couple of other news shows. It's Fox Network in which you see the pulsing symbols the most clear. Then I found that at YouTube, the Fox Network video is still there.
Yeah, someone just posted it in the chat.
I raised this question to the Beverly Hills attorney. I have talked about it with Steve Allen, with Angela Joyner, the reporter, with several people. Why did they come to me, and Linda Howe specifically, and EarthFiles.com specifically, with the attorney's letter followed by the exclusive agreement, when YouTube, Fox Network, Corpus Christi, everything that has been there is still there?
That's a good question, yeah.
So I feel I've been singled out, and I'm now personally very suspicious of the company Motion Picture Productions, Inc. Are they a government cutout going around buying up really significant footage that goes into a black hole? And in my case, they didn't expect that somebody like me, with the ability that I have to reach the public, would have been handed a CD of the video, and that I went immediately to Earth Files and put everything I could with the idea of doing a hell of a lot more, and that they said, we have to stop her. My guess is that something like that happened, and it makes me angry, because YouTube, it's still there at YouTube. The Fox Network story is still there at YouTube, And as my understanding, as of 4 days ago, nobody has approached YouTube or Fox Network or anybody else to take down the video that they use.
You know, I mean, if it's on YouTube without any comments, and if you look at those symbols, you can't really make anything out of it without any additional explanation. But on your website, it would have been in the right context.
Right,
and
because I was showing them high definition, clear, frame by frame that could be studied.
Yeah, but you would also come up with some connections here, and you would analyze it, and that's something completely different. Maybe that's, you know.
And I'm continuing, and I am finding that the pencil sketches, even though they don't show the immense detail, I'm thinking that what I need to do is to at least do a few that are absolutely with colored pencil as close as I can possibly match, so that people can see how intricate the color beading is and how dimensional. It would take me weeks, I'm serious, to reproduce in color the intricacy of each of these symbols, which number over 1,000. Think about that. And what I am finding, though, is that with a normal number 2 lead pencil, that in reproducing the shapes, I am discovering absolute matches to some of the ancient symbols of, say, Samaritan and some of the Qumran scrolls, and I'm thinking, wow, this is not like the government playing around with a light show. This has the subtext of ancient language that has not been used for centuries.
Linda, there's one question here that I was also pondering, and Paul Gaul in the chat posed the same question just now. These symbols were three-dimensional in the night sky, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So the angle viewing on it would, of course, distort or change the symbol.
Yeah.
So
yes.
So maybe one could, you know, if you could find a match, if you could find a symbol of those ancient symbols, and then find out in which direction, which distortion was done to this symbol because of the perspective it was filmed, and then you could correct this, it might be much easier to identify other matches.
Well,
Can you follow me?
I have thought all about this, because this does not take very long. Let me read you one viewer comment from an engineer. I use 3D, which is three-dimensional, CAD. That's the when you use a computer to create three-dimensional engineering structures. I use 3D CAD software to design kitchen and bath layouts for my business in Chicago. What strikes me about the uniqueness of the Texas light symbols is that they are three-dimensional, i.e. they occupy space rather than two-dimensional surfaces, as you have shown in the Brazilian and the Adamski symbols, which were only written on pieces of paper. The 3D symbols are going to look different depending upon who is looking at them from what direction. The two-dimensional symbols can only project one meaning because they are on a flat surface. If someone recreated the light symbols in three-dimensional CAD, you would be able to reorient them by changing the perspective view and evaluate how their projection and possible meaning changed. An interesting question. Were the people who recorded the images the ones who were intended to perceive them, or did the symbols have greater meaning if they were viewed from a different observation point? And if so, who, if anyone, were the symbols meant for? I find that a very intelligent email. It is going right to the crux of what you are raising. And I thought a lot about this. And because I have interviewed so many people in the abduction syndrome for more than 25 years, and probably have interviewed now 800 or 900 people, I think about this in this way. Over and over again are the descriptions of people on a freeway in a car. They don't know what happens except that a beam of light surrounds their car, and the next thing they know, they are either rising in the car or they're being taken out of the car, and it all is impossible, and it's physics we don't understand, and everybody says, why didn't other drivers see this? Why weren't other people stopping? Where was the rest of the world? And the answer that has been emerging over the last decade is that we're dealing with advanced intelligence that has the ability to deflect photons. And if you deflect photons in such a way that only one person, one car, can perceive what is occurring, the rest of the world is oblivious, but you get one interaction. Now, if you take that 3 decades of experiences like that in the human abduction syndrome, and you go to David Caron's porch, he is seeing that disk in the sky, which makes him go and get his camera. And, Derek, it's very possible that there could have been all 15,000 people in Stephenville out that night at 10:10 p.m. on January 19th, 2008, and not a single other person could have seen what David Caron saw from his porch, because the phenomenon controls what human minds see what it's doing. That is a possibility, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but the mere fact that we are talking about such possibilities shows how very complex and very confusing this is. And you've been looking into cases like Stephenville. I mean, this is not the first time something like this happened.
Well, it's the first time, I can say this with confidence, it is the first time on record anywhere on this planet that digital videotape, 12 minutes long, has at least 6 to 7 minutes of good, clear, I'm saying projected 3-dimensional multicolored symbols, because they appear to match ancient text.
I understand. I mean, the flashing symbols, that's really a new development, but similar, let's say sightings, experiences people make. You've been into this for 30 years. Yeah. And the Stephenville case is really a very complex case. I mean, take alone the story about this deer. Oh my God, this is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. And I already knew the story because I heard it on Whitley Strieber's show, I think, on Dreamland.
When I told it there.
Yes. And I have to agree with Whitley. I mean, this is like out of a movie. This is, what the heck is going on here? And I really wonder, how do you cope with all of this? I mean, you've been around such stories, around such information for 30 years, or even longer maybe, since you do, I think Strange Harvest was in the late 70s.
Yeah, it was 1979. This is 2008, so this is exactly 29 years later.
Yeah, and I mean, isn't that difficult sometimes? I mean, don't you sometimes wish you had never started to look into this? I mean,
no, and I realize I must be different than most people. I have come to accept that I am different. In this regard, I have always had enormous curiosity. I am always attracted to mysteries more than anything else. The animal mutilation mystery was so huge, continues to this day, that once I had been exposed to it and law enforcement telling me that we were definitely dealing with creatures from outer space perpetrating the animal mutilations. Derek, how would you ever leave such a story until you had all the answers?
No, you won't, but it drags you in. I mean, you can't stop anything.
It doesn't overwhelm me. It is never too much. It gives me a reason to get up every morning of my life to find out what more has occurred, and that I feel that I do have a much deeper understanding now in 2008 about what the government knows and is hiding because they think that the world cannot take it. And my argument is that anything as serious and huge as extraterrestrial biological entities manipulating DNA and already evolving primates to create humanity is a subject that every human on this planet deserves to know what their so-called government leaders know and keep from us. I think there is a fundamental earthquake
on this planet, if you want to put it that way, in which the power, greed, elite separated themselves a long time ago from the middle and lower class masses and said, nobody is going to know the truth about extraterrestrial interaction with the Earth. We will be the only ones, and we will make trillions of dollars off of their technologies that we shoot down and retrieve.
The day after Roswell.
I think that is part of the story that the governments don't want the public to know.
So you think that this is all about money? I mean,
a lot of it has been about money, yes. Yeah, going back to FDR and Truman.
Yeah.
They saw technologies that if they could understand that they would be able to apply, but then it was coupled with the political. There's always politics. And the politicians are the ones, unfortunately, which run the world. And they are the ones who usually are the people most afraid of their own shadow. And the politicians are the ones who said, there is no way that we're going to open up this story that will affect religions, knock the stock market down, and that we have been living a gigantic lie. We are not alone in this universe. The governments know that, and they are afraid that if they open up the truth, that all of the so-called predictable economic barter system of the planet will fall apart. They don't want that to happen. So they put it in a scale and they say lies are much more preferable to planetary chaos. And I look at it that the planet deserves tough love. Some people might be upset. A lot of others now will not be, to be told the truth about the presence of a non-human, one or more non-human intelligences that have been interacting with this planet for millions of years, according to some government documents. And so, to me, right now, 2008 going forward, everybody's worried about what's going to happen in 2012. Will it be something of an astronomical nature? Well, I'm telling you, whatever it is, I hope fervently that it is truth with a capital T that is finally delivered to this planet, and that we can get out of the shackles and these unnatural straitjackets of governments that have been keeping populations blind, deaf, and dumb, decade after decade. Take the tax money so that you can keep your government operations going, but don't allow the public to know the truth. There is something so fundamentally wrong and corrupt with that attitude. And if Linda Howe, with my books, my documentaries, TV programs, earthfiles.com, is keeping the door open a little bit on the truth, that's what has fueled me for 29 years.
Oh, I think you're doing a tremendous job here. I think you're documenting a lot of things that other people don't look at on your website, earthfiles.com. And I think all of this that you documented here and that you continue to document and talk about will be very important in the future, because we will look back at this time and maybe this will be very important, proof and data that we can use to figure out what happened. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, if the truth comes out, then all of this work that I have been piling up year after year will be looked at as pioneer ground of the truth. And it is. I know that. I know that my work is based on solid fact and truth. And to be in a planet in which real truth and real fact has been dismissed by governments as something that doesn't exist is beyond Orwellian 1984. And there are some of us who know that it's preposterous how easy it has been for governments to pull the wool over public eyes with those words. It's a hoax, it's a balloon, it's swamp gas, and that 99% of the population turns away when a so-called government authority says, no, we're alone in the universe. No, there's nothing here. This is just... And you say, how is this possible? How can large masses of humans be manipulated so easily by single words coming from governments?
Yeah. Okay.
That, to me, is a problem.
It is. and the other problem we have is that we never have enough time. And
we never. It's amazing that we've been going for 90 minutes.
Yes,
but
70 minutes.
I hope that I have communicated about the most important material.
Oh, it was a fascinating report, and everyone who wants to go deeper into this, earthfiles.com is the place to go. A tremendous website, and of course it's linked up from the show description. Thank you very much, Linda.
And thank you.
It's been 2.5 years since we did the last show. I hope I don't have to wait so long for our next one.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being there and trying to open up the minds of your radio audience. God bless you. God bless this planet in whatever is going to unfold. And I just hope you and your audience join me in be curious and try to find out. Don't be afraid.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Ja, auch wieder eine spannende Sendung, so wie die letzte. Es geht aber spannend weiter. Das nächste Mal ist Illobrand von Ludwiger bei mir zu Gast und es geht um Burkhard Heim. Kennen nicht allzu viele. Ist ein äußerst interessanter Mann, der schon verstorben ist 2001 und der Physiker war und interessanteste Dinge herausgefunden hat, die leider nur sehr wenige Menschen verstehen und dadurch auch noch weniger dem Ganzen nachgehen. Aber Illobrand von Ludwiger und eine Gruppe von Wissenschaftlern tun das, Gott sei Dank. Und das nächste Mal wird er uns darüber berichten, was mich sehr freut. Über diesen Mann, nämlich Burkhard Heim, wollte ich schon lange etwas machen. Ja, ich danke allen fürs Zuhören. Wir hören uns wieder am 14. März 2008. Bis dahin, macht es gut. Rising